think a crisis is necessary and inevitable. More than one crisis. That's how big changes happen. It's how they happen in my life. It's how many, many people describe their process of transformation. And I think it's true on a collective level too. And it's inevitable. Like, unless you believe that infinite growth can happen on a finite planet, we're headed for crisis, because our system only works in the context of growth. But we're obviously reaching limits to growth. First and foremost, ecological limits. We're in the space between stories now. Inner being is a word that I've been told was coined by Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese monk. And it's a little stronger than interdependency or interconnection, which might mean separate beings having connections or depending on each other. But interbeing means it's kind of like interexistence. It means not only for me to survive do I need you and you and you and other beings, but in order to even exist, my existence depends on the existence of others. I'm not a separate self. Therefore, what happens to you is happening to me. What happens to the planet is happening to me. What happens to the rainforest is happening to me. What happens to my enemy is happening to me. We're all part of the same being. And every person mirrors every other person and every other being on the planet. Yeah, I guess everybody has a story about who they are and how the world works. And usually that story is kind of invisible to us because we're swimming in it. It immerses us. It's part of our whole way of seeing. So, and everybody has their own individual story. But also a culture has stories that are shared to some extent by almost everybody in the culture. And we just take these for granted as reality itself. So the story creates, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And there's never, ultimately, there's never a way to be absolutely sure that your story is true. And when we believe that the nature of life is competition, that biology programs us to be ruthless competitors and take advantage of each other, and that we live in a world of hostile, opportunistic beings, then fear is natural. That's like our natural state. Part of the story that I call separation says that I'm an individual, fundamentally. You're an individual. Some people are good, some people are not so good. We're all fundamentally different. So that opens the door to judgment. Judgment, and what I mean by judgment is the belief that if I were you, I would do different than you, probably better. If I were you, I wouldn't, throw litter in the park. If I were you, I would have put out my campfire more carefully. If I were you, I would have been a better human being than you're being. That's a judgment. And so it says, fundamentally, I'm different from you. An alternative to that is called situationism. That says, actually, if I were in the totality of your circumstances, if I had been born where you were born, had the family you had, in subject to the pressures you're under, if I had your whole life experience, if I were in your situation, then I would do as you do. When we understand that, then when someone does something we disapprove of, the impulse is no longer to punish them for being bad and to try to deter them from doing it again. The first impulse is to understand. What's it like to be you? What's the context from which you wanted to do this thing? Or you felt compelled to do this thing? Because when I understand that, then I can change the context. I can change the situation. So we're no longer in opposition to each other. We're allies. How can we live in the new story? How can we withstand the habits of the old? This is not something that we can do by ourselves. I think it requires community. It requires help. It requires other people to hold us in this new and ancient story to remind us that we're all connected, that we'll be okay when we serve what's beautiful to us. You know, that generosity is not crazy, that kindness is not crazy, that all of these explorations we're making into a new world are not crazy. On my own, I begin to doubt, and I begin to lose sight of what had seemed so clear in those special moments where I caught a glimpse of a different world. You know, I lose touch with it. And I'm fortunate to have people who remind me and pull me back because they've seen it too. Yes, truth is something we can sense, using perhaps the organ of the heart and not the mind. This doesn't mean that truth is a human creation. It's not that we create a truth that feels good to us or something like that. It's that we listen for it, we sense into it. And it's something greater than ourselves. And even our stories are something greater than ourselves. We're storytellers, but we're not actually the creators of the stories. Sometimes a story rises and it's powerful and it takes over a whole culture. And maybe somebody thinks that they were the first to tell that story, but really they're just speaking from a field. They're the instrument of a story. I mean, these are just words. Know, believe, feel, sense, right? These are words that we use. So you might say, well, it's the mind that knows. No, I think the heart knows and the mind believes. A lot of people are in the condition now where their heart knows, but their mind does not believe. Their heart knows that a more beautiful world is possible. Their heart knows that they're supposed to be free. You know, their heart knows that the built environment is supposed to be more beautiful than it is. The heart knows that they're not supposed to be confined in a classroom. The heart knows that their life energy is supposed to go towards something they care about, that they love. The heart knows that they're not supposed to hate Monday. But the mind doesn't fully accept some of these things. The mind maybe believes some, half believes others, and doubts the rest. So our task maybe is to bring heart and mind into alignment now, so that we can act unconflicted. I think that for it to be successful, it has to have a mission beyond just we're going to get together and have community. There has to be a larger purpose, because real community requires interdependency. It requires that you need each other. If you really need each other, then you can't just leave, or you can't just kick somebody out lightly, because you need them. You know, a traditional village was like that. You needed the blacksmith. You had to get along with the blacksmith somehow. You know, you couldn't do something too terrible to the other people in the community, otherwise you would suffer too. So today, one of the difficulties in creating community is that at some level people know that at least for their survival, they don't really need each other. You know, I could leave the community. If you live, say, in Zeg community, I could just go to Berlin and get a job there. I don't really need these people. But if you're all committed toward a common purpose, then you do need each other. Maybe not for your survival, but you need each other like a band needs the bass player. You know, a band needs the guitarist. Without the guitarist, then you're not going to have, you're not going to be able to play your music. So you need that person. So in the same way, if a community has a common purpose, then everybody's needed, or everybody's gifts are needed. And I can look at you and I say, I need you, because without you, this thing I really care about would not thrive. It would not be successful. So that when you have that mutual need, then when conflicts come up, you've got to find a way to resolve them. You can't just, well, I'm leaving, or get out. You have to, because you need this person, so you have to resolve conflicts, and that creates a culture of conflict resolution, so that the community doesn't just break apart when the first stress shows up. You know, I think pretty much everybody, if you really question them, would say that we need to move toward a world built on love. They might be embarrassed to say it sometimes, but I think everybody knows this. I think that the geometry of the circle makes interbeing seem quite natural, because everybody can see everybody else. Nobody is in a higher or lower position. So it encourages the perception that we're all in this together, and that we're all part of a larger being. Also, circle is related to gift too, because gifts travel in circles. Ecology also works in a circle, where the waste of one being, of one species, of one organism, is food for another. And the waste of that one is food for another, and again, it travels back in a circle. So this guy shows up at the hospital emergency room with his ears terribly burnt. And the doctor says, "Oh my goodness, what happened?" And he says, "Well, it's kind of embarrassing, but I was ironing my shirt and the phone rang, and I picked up my iron and put it to my ear." The doctor's like, "Oh, wow, that's bad. But what happened to the other ear?" He says, "Well, after that, I had to call 911.
Okay, that's a good one.
Maybe 911's a different number in Europe, but you get the joke. 110? Yeah. So I had to call 110, but I like the innocence of that, you know, and also it just kind of, well, you can draw your own meaning from it. It has a spiritual message. Yeah, but it's a very gentle one.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you so much.